You've lived a great life and done well for yourself. But what mark will you leave on the world? How will you inspire future generations? Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand have helped thousands of people answer exactly those questions. If you've ever wondered, what will be my legacy? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Stan and Katie Beth.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. Today, we are joined by John Jennings. John, welcome to the show.
Hey.
So great to have you on the show. So, John, you serve as the president and the chief strategist of the St. Louis Trust and Family Office. So, for our listeners, give us just a very brief overview of what it is that you do and also what got you started in this industry.
Yeah, sure. I'll start by giving a little background. So I started as an estate planning lawyer at a large St. Louis law firm. I did estate planning, tax law, and a little bit of traffic law on the side, which I still do. Believe it or not, the Missouri is a speeder's paradise because you can get your traffic tickets fixed pretty easily. Not all states are that way. But anyway, then I worked at Arthur Andersen. I now am finding that I'm having to explain what Arthur Andersen is to younger people. But for all of you haven't heard of Arthur Andersen, it was one of the big five accounting firms. Now there's a big four, and they went under in the wake of the Enron scandal. And then we formed our firm, St. Louis Trust and Family Office, out of the ashes of Arthur Andersen. So we've been in business for 20 years. So a handful of us met with our primary founder, who was looking to start a boutique trust company, was his thought. And we brought 14 client families with us and about 500 million of assets under management. And today, 20 years later, we oversee about 13 billion of investment assets, 15 to 16 billion if you include everything else, for 63 families all across the United States. So if you do the quick math on that, our average client has a bit over $200 million.
That's fantastic. So what got you started in this industry? What made you interested in doing this type of thing?
Oh my gosh. I went to law school basically because I didn't want to stop taking naps. I didn't want to leave the utopia, which was Columbia, Missouri. As you know, pretty much every major college town is their own form of utopia surrounded by reality, right?
True.
I will say Columbia actually really is utopia.
It's fabulous. But then, I hadn't visited, like Boulder, Colorado or Madison, Wisconsin. And I was like, okay, Columbia was cool, but not quite. And then also I graduated during the first jobless recovery. I graduated in 1992, and then I saw a lot of people not getting great jobs. So I was like, what the heck? I'll go to law school. And in law school, which I loved, I liked my trust and estates course, but then I took a 5-hour course on estate tax, wealth transfer tax laws. And I was like, I'm hooked. Like, I just love the creativity of it. I mean, it's technical, but yet creative. And I just fell in love. And then on my first day at my big law firm, I'd clerked there 2 summers. I was assigned to like healthcare transactions and like real estate or something. And I went into the head of the corporate department. I said, I'd like to switch. I'd like to be a tax and estates lawyer. And he's like, are you crazy? He goes, that sounds horrible. I'm like, yeah, but that's what I want to do.
That is fantastic. So talk to us about some of the unique strategies and tools that you use to help these families that you work with now, the 63 families that you work with. What are some of your unique strategies and things that you do with your clients?
Well, I think, we mainly work in the $100 million and up range, kind of 100 to 500. We have some above that, some below that, but that's the main range we work in. But so it's really understanding what each family wants. We've had some families. In fact, I had a client die about a year ago, very, very well, hundreds of millions of dollars. And he did pretty much no tax focused estate planning. He's like, I want to keep things simple. I don't want to complicate my life. My family will have enough and I won't be around to pay the taxes. Right. And there are some families that are like that. Others are like, I want to save every last dollar I can. I want to do every estate planning transaction I possibly can. And even if you have hundreds of millions of dollars, if you start early and you're willing to do what it takes, the estate tax is largely optional.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
In fact, there was one of my partners wrote an article, and I forget who said it, but there was this person that had said only morons pay estate tax. He wrote an article about that, and I think that's a little strong, but I wouldn't say if you pay estate tax you're a moron. But yeah, so it's just how much do they want to be tax focused and complicate their lives. We do a lot of installment sales to intentionally defective trusts. That's the go-to that our clients end up using. I would say of our 63 families, probably 55 of them have done that transaction at one point in time. And then on top of that, there's all the charitable strategies and the grats and the Cuperts and the gifting and the discounting and all that on top of it.
Stan, I know you're brimming with questions.
Yeah, I'm all ready to jump in here because I'm guessing that when you have client families like the kind you're describing, these are large enough accounts that you have every opportunity to spend quality time with them, to get to know them at a deeper level, right? One of the things that's fascinated me, and this is, I wrote a book about this, which I'm going to send you, but I'm really fascinated by the why of wealth, the why, and estate planning to me opens the door to it creates the opportunity for clients to share with us, to the extent they've thought about it, what they want the meaning of their wealth to be over a long time horizon, not just during your lifetime, but after they're gone. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that those are conversations that you have sometimes with your clients.
We absolutely do. Yeah. And it's interesting. Actually, so I've written a book that's more investment focused. My next book it is tentatively titled. I've learned that whatever you think your title is, your publisher ends up changing it. So, but tentatively it's titled, I've started writing it, is How to Be Wealthy. And it's not how to get wealthy. It's once you're wealthy, how do you do that well with purpose? And how do you do it without ruining your children? And how what happens? It's kind of like you've moved up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yep.
What do you do? What do you do when you don't have to go to work to save for retirement and put your kids in college? And a thing that we deal with some of our clients is what do I do with all this money? Like, what do I do with it? And we start out early on and we ask the question. I love to ask the question this way. I say, okay, let's say over the next 30 years, you can get a 7% return or a 9% return. You obviously would prefer the 9, right? Assuming a similar, path to getting there. But why? Like, what are you going to do with that extra, 2% over 30 years? I mean, where's it going to go? Other than the fact that you've won, your opportunity was getting 9 versus why would you take 7? What are you going to do with it? And I've had a number of clients just stop and look at me and they're like, I don't know. I would just take the 9 because it's more money. I'm like, what are you going to do with more money? So my favorite definition of wealthy, and it's my favorite because I came up with it, but this is dealing with these sorts of clients for decades, is whether you look at somebody's total wealth, their net worth, or their income. And if you said, if it doubled tomorrow, would anything materially change about their life? And if the answer is no, like, oh, I'd like that because I'd feel more financial security, or I'd save more, or I could give more to charity, whatever. But if nothing else changes, so like basically your wants, your needs, and then your wants are being met by your current income and wealth, anything above that is just what I like to refer to as being in the gravy, right? And pretty much all our clients are in the gravy. So we don't really do financial planning or retirement planning. It's like, what do you want the legacy of your life to be, or the money to be? They're related. Yeah.
So I want to consider this conversation. I want you to consider this conversation, John, as an opportunity to kind of try out some of the themes that are going to be in this book. This is like a prequel, right?
Yeah.
Like a preface to this. And then I promise I'll buy the book whenever it comes out. We'll promote it. But what are some of the themes that, that when you get past the idea of this, what do you do next? What are some of the things you're developing there?
Like in terms of what do you do with the wealth, and what do you do with
how to be wealthy? What are some of the themes there about how to be wealthy?
Yeah, so part of it is the relationship between money and happiness. And people always say, money doesn't buy happiness, and that's not right. It absolutely can if used correctly. And pretty much every study out there shows a positive correlation between having more money and being happier or showing greater life satisfaction. Now, these are averages, so there's we all can think of exceptions in either direction. But like if you have more money, you have typically better healthcare, and you have greater leisure time typically, and you have all these things you can do. But a key is that and I write for Forbes, and I wrote an article in Forbes, how to the ways to use money to buy happiness. And what research has found is one of the key ways to do this is you use your money to buy experiences rather than things, right? So that's number one. And a second is that you use it with other people. So we're social animals. So there was this great David Brooks, who writes in the New York Times. He wrote this great article about 10 or 11 years ago, and it's called the Hamish line. And Hamish is like some Yiddish word or Hebrew word. I forget what it means. But he talked about in this book going on the safari. And that part of the safari, they lived in this village where everybody was basically in this little hut. But every night, everybody would gather around the fire, and they would sing and they'd drink or do whatever they were doing. And it was like this great experience. And then they went to like this other area that was like this town, and everybody stayed in houses, but everybody, you had neighbors, you felt sort of collegial. And then as part of the trip, they were staying basically in this resort where everybody had their own little cabin, and nobody saw each other, and everybody felt isolated. And he said, you could take that back to America. And you see a lot of times when people have more and more wealth, they isolate themselves, and they're living on acreage, and they have, all sorts of, gates and whatever. And really, we're social, tribal. That's how we are. So it's kind of interesting to look at how you use your wealth. Like, are you isolating yourself, or are you making yourself more connected? And you can overcome these things. Sometimes some of these houses that are in gated communities, sometimes a gated community is great. Sometimes there's a country club there. So I'm not poo-pooing any of that. It's just thinking about how you're spending your time. You can use your money to be around other people more. Like I had a client that rented a jet, like a huge jet, like a commercial airliner size, and took 50 friends and family members to Europe and paid for it all, like for 2 weeks. Like, that's awesome. Like that, it's like, wow. It was really expensive, but and then we were like, and some of this is a gift to some of these people that you've already made annual exclusion gifts to. And he's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, nope. Sorry.
Do you do a lot with philanthropy and getting families started in charities and different things like that? Is that a part of what you do as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I teach a course at Washington University in St. Louis in their graduate wealth and asset management program. I teach a course called, what is it called? Endowments, Foundations, and Philanthropy, right? So it's because I've gotten so interested in this, helping clients. So you can think of charitable giving in like a continuum. So on one side is being charitable. So that's where you give to organizations that you know and you like, and you think they're doing good work. And that's great. And that's what most people do. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have philanthropy. So think about I think it's still called this, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And like think about how they give. They're not worried about individual charities. They're taking on things like they want to end malaria, right? So they're going to give where they're seeing a return on their charitable dollars. And what we do is some of our clients, not everybody's interested, is taking some of their giving maybe from charitable to philanthropic, and say, what causes are you interested in? And let's try to really move the needle and do this as some of these bigger, more professional donors give. So on one hand, if they're on more of the charitable giving, yes, we'll keep track of it. We'll help facilitate it, do it in a tax efficient manner. Listen to my sirens in the background. Here I am in Clayton, Missouri. So anyway, sorry about that. So what we have, let me pass here a little bit. So we'll help keep track of all their charitable giving, and donor advised funds will run their private foundations. help negotiate, pledges and different sort of structured giving, talk about different charitable planning through different charitable trusts. But then we'll also help them and sometimes bring in outside consultants that specialize in this to do the more, values-based focused philanthropy.
So John, one of the interests of mine in particular has been to look at the connection between family philanthropy in the impact that our senior generation clients want to have on younger generation family members, and in connecting those two dots. I'm really curious to hear your take on that, and given the experiences I'm sure you've had with your clients.
Yeah. So what we've seen be effective, let me first say that a lot of times the older generation is just frustrated, right? So they're sometimes at a different point of their life and they'll think charity and giving is really important. And it's just not always a given that the kids are going to come along with that. And we've done various things where, like, if they have a donor advice fund, it's like, okay, we're going to split out a certain amount every year to each of the next generation so that they can give. So we're going to give them the money to give. We've done things where we've encouraged them to be on charitable boards. This whole idea of being philanthropic, though, is great. So where a family has a family foundation or a donor advised fund, sometimes we'll, have them on the board and, have them involved in evaluating grants or even deciding the areas. So we worked with a family once and where we were putting this together, and the family was like, okay, one of our areas is the environment and another is, healthcare, and the younger generation had a say in the subcategories. So like, one of the younger generation was very passionate in healthcare about childhood obesity. So that became something that the family gave to. So I think those, this whole idea of being a little bit more of a strategic philanthropist is great for bringing in the next generation. But I will admit that just because the senior generation is interested doesn't mean the lower generation is going to be. And I've seen the vice versa, where the lower generation is really interested in charitable giving and the older generation isn't. So, you tend to have some shared family values and cultures and things, but not always.
Yeah, no, that's, I'm sure that's true. But one of the things that we know, I'm sure you've seen this many times over your career, is, the power of wealth to do damage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always, I felt like if the senior generation could somehow connect the younger generation and get them interested, at least nudge them gently in that direction, that philanthropy does become potentially an antidote to what we called affluenza.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the number one concern of our clients, not every single one of them, but across the board, is worried about ruining their kids or grandkids or great grandkids.
So what are some of the strategies that you're helping them implement to prevent that?
Well, the number one thing we tell our clients, and this is we've done a lot of reading and research on this, and actually one of the best books on this was published in the early 1990s. I don't think it's even in print anymore, but it was by this PhD psychologist that was a counselor, was the main counselor at like the Beverly Hills School District. It's fantastic. But the number one thing is living, we tell our clients, if you live your values, that's the best chance of them, happening. So if you think it's important that your kids have jobs and work, then you should have a job and work, right? It's hard to say, okay, I'm going to be, maybe well-earned, well-deserved, but I'm just going to be, early retired or late retired or whatever. And I'm going to be preaching to my kids the value of working. Like, if they don't see you working, it's sometimes harder for that to take. Like, we see these family values that roll through generations. I mean, we've had clients that have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and nobody spends any money. Like, their entire, family culture ethos is, we don't spend money and we stay under the radar, and we're not about material things. And I mean, that presents its own set of problems, by the way. And then, others that do charitable giving, and yeah, there's other ways. But I think one risk advisors have is advisors, with rare exception, are basically middle class, right? They come from typically middle class or maybe lower than that backgrounds. They go to college, they go to maybe grad school, they get certifications, they work. And so we're influenced, and I put myself in that category. We put ourselves, like, we're influenced by how we were raised and how we're raising our children and our friends and our social group. And I think there can be this tendency sometimes to put those values on people that are in a just much different generation. Like we have some client families that have had, tremendous wealth for 3, 4, 5, 6 generations, and to try to put middle-class values on that, it just doesn't fit. I mean, for their family, maybe you work for a few years after college and that's fine, so we just try to be careful about, we're not always successful of not projecting to another family what we think their values should be. So part of it is a discovery of, what are their values? Because from the outside, it can look like affluenza or, the idle rich or what have you. And some of these people are just very happy and fulfilled.
Yeah. So we've talked about the book that you're writing. Tell me about the book you have written.
Oh yeah, thanks. So the book I've written that comes out in May, because it takes forever, even though I was done writing and the first round of editing was done in this past April. It's called The Uncertainty Solution: How to Invest with Confidence in the Face of the Unknown. So a big part of my job and our firm here is, we manage money. So the book is not how to invest, but it's more how to think about investing. And really in the wake of the financial crisis, before that, I felt like to be a good wealth advisor, that I basically had to know as much as possible about everything that was going on in the financial markets. And I came to realize through the financial crisis that that's just not true, that I was in the forest and, I was in the trees, not seeing the forest. And really what great investors do is they fall back on mental models. So mental models are models you keep in your head of how the world works. And Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner, first championed this idea back in 1994, not necessarily of investment mental models, but of mental models in business and in personal lives to make decisions. And he says you have to study them, and you have to have these things that when to fall back on. You just can't just randomly, just bang back facts at people. They've got to be things that hang like in your head. So like one of his is, like, if you ever sent an email and not got a response, right? You're like, oh, you maybe feel hurt, maybe get a bit angry, or other things happen in your life. One of his favorite mental models is called Hanlon's razor. And it says, never attribute malice to that which can be explained by stupidity or carelessness or disorganization or whatever. And if you think about it, if you use this all the time, when you don't get a response back to an email, you get cut off at traffic, or your brother forgets your birthday, or you get ghosted for lunch. Like, remember that people with a rare circumstance, unless they're a teenage girl, do not intend malice. And I say that as a father, 2 girls in their 20s. They come back out of that valley, by the way. So that's an example of mental model. And there's these other great mental models that great investors use that they fall back on. So that's what the book's about. And it's not just about investing. Like my 23-year-old daughter, who's getting her master's in English, so she's not like a financial person. She read it and she was like, Dad, this isn't even really an investing book. This is like how to make decisions better in life. And it's mostly stories, and it's kind of fun. I like it. It's gotten good.
Well, you got me engaged. I'm really fascinated with this, and so I'm going to hop off as soon as we conclude. So I'm going to hop on Amazon and buy it. I hope, is it there?
Well,
yet?
it's not out till May. So sorry.
Yeah, May 2023, and we'll talk about this again at the show. But for all of our listeners who may have missed it, the book is called The Uncertainty Solution: How to Invest with Confidence in the Face of the Unknown, and it comes out in May 2023. So for some of our listeners, it will already be out. And will it be available on Amazon and all the major retailers, John?
Everywhere. And
okay,
bookstores and everything. They're out, like the publishing companies out selling them right now to buyers. So we'll see.
Awesome, fantastic. Well, it sounds like it would be a great read.
And my goal with the book isn't necessarily like a lot of sales. I mean, I'd rather it be read than sold. So we plan to give away a lot of them. And I really think for people that read the book, I mean, my true hope is that they have more money in 20 years than they would have otherwise.
It's great. It's fantastic. And that's not the only thing that you have going on. Obviously, there are multiple other things. But one thing that caught my interest is that you have a blog that is the interesting fact of the day. So tell us a little bit about the iFod.com, what your motivation is, what kind of things you put on there, why people should go and check that out.
Yeah, it's really pretty eclectic. It doesn't have any particular theme. In fact, the branding person I'm working with for my book, she looked at it and she goes, at first I thought maybe we can tighten this up. And, in terms of your brand, and wealth management and estate planning and all that. And she goes, no, I thought about it. Like, I guess part of your brand is just eclectic, interesting things. So I can't say that they're all interesting. I think they're all interesting, but yeah, it just really varies. So some of my top ones that get a lot of hits, thousands and thousands of hits a year are: what happens to a bullet shot straight up in the air in terms of physics? Believe it or not, that has like 15,000 clicks. Why do females generally have neater handwriting than males? Is another one that's gotten quite a few. Why do competitors tend to put stores next to each other? Have you ever noticed a CVS and a Walgreens right down the street, or a Home Depot and a Lowe's? Why do they do that? So yeah, all sorts of things like that. So my most recent one is right before Thanksgiving, since we're in the World Cup soccer timetable right now. What is the economic drag in terms of lost worker productivity from World Cup games? And with some fascinating data looking at stock trades and how when a country's soccer team is playing, how much their volume of stock trading falls off during the game. Fascinating.
It is fascinating, and all of the things that I've looked at on there are very interesting and very much across the board. I would be very interested to also see the stats of the one you're talking about, broken down by country as well. But
Yeah.
very interesting, the iFod.com. So for our listeners, be sure to go there. You can sign up. You can sign up on there to get it by email. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, exactly. And
Fantastic.
importantly, it's easy to unsubscribe, and I'm not selling anything.
Great. That's great. Just interesting facts. But, great. I think this is great for financial advisors and attorneys as well, because sometimes some of these things look like they might be a great conversation starter when new clients come in for an initial visit. What a great random topic to get the ball rolling is some of these very interesting facts of the day.
Yeah. So John, do you feel pressure to have to come up with, those are really interesting topics. I mean, do you worry that maybe tomorrow you won't have one that's that interesting?
I have about 500 of them in the queue. So and so I read a ton. So I've read, I don't know, 64, 65 books so far this year. That's about my usual. I read around, I don't know, 70 something a year typically. But if you read a ton, and then when you're reading anything else that's not a book, and you came across something, you said, oh, that's interesting, and you emailed it yourself and kept it in a folder, it wouldn't be that hard to find things. What is surprising to me is how many things I read that I go, oh, that's interesting, and then when I dig into it, it's not correct. In fact, I think one of my upcoming iFods is things that people think are true that are absolutely not true.
I'm already interested. Another one that I would suggest would be, this is what I used to run into all the time, quotes that people think, my background's in ministry, quotes that people think came from scripture that actually aren't at all from scripture. People use them all the time and they're like, and that's from the Bible. It's not. And so that would be a very interesting iFod is people quoting, maybe misquotes would be a great
Misquotes.
iFod topic.
I'm going to email it to myself. Misquotes would be great because there's all quotes that are attributed to people. I mean, probably like half the quotes attributed to Mark Twain and a quarter attributed to Yogi Berra was are probably not correct.
Yes. So there you go. That is your payback for being on the show today. We gave you some things for your iPods. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you would like our listeners to know about?
Oh, there's so much, but I know we have limited time. Something I've been researching lately is and kind of maybe think more about this, things that people think are true that are not. Is I had long thought, and I've read multiple places, that something like 70 or 80% of jackpot winners in the lottery go bankrupt within a certain amount of time. or think that
Right.
their lives were ruined. And that is absolutely incorrect. Completely.
Really, I've read that. I've heard that
I've read it
from
too.
multiple sources. Yeah.
I have read it too. I have read it too. And I was like certain of it. And it's certain that it's out there. And it's based on partially a study from 1978 that's sort of been misinterpreted and only had a sample size of 22, which is pretty small. And then it's based on the National Financial Education Foundation. I think that's what they're called. So it's always attributed to them if it's attributed to anybody. And they put out a statement in 2014 saying, stop saying the stat. There's no scientific backing for it. And what happened was, according to them, is I guess they had like a round table of financial advisors. And one of the advisors said that stat. So then it was on the website of this, prestigious organization. So people would cite it, and then it just made itself everywhere. And it turns out that there's a lot better conducted studies that find, these are averages. So there's definitely exceptions, but the lottery winners show greater life satisfaction 2 and 5 and 10 years later than control samples. Wow.
See,
Yeah.
that is an interesting fact for the day. I would have said that was inaccurate because I have read
I would have too.
the inaccurate data on that from multiple sources. By the way, it's quoted in books. I've seen it on different websites, and everybody talks about that.
Like a known truism. It's like people saying that the only man-made structure you can see from space is the Great Wall of China. Also completely incorrect. Not true. You cannot see the Great Wall of China from space. You know what you can maybe see is like a Walmart supercenter. It's all lit up.
Yeah, right.
We're State and I are located here in Arkansas, so we know all about Walmart supercenters. We're the home of Walmart here.
Oh, of course you are.
Of course you are. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. Our guest today has been John Jennings. You can find out more information about John at stlouistrust.com, and you can check out his interesting fact of the day at www.theifod, that's THEIFOD.com. And you can check out his book, The Uncertainty Solution. John, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate everything.
Thank you both. That was fun.
Thanks for listening to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To find out more about Stan and Katie Beth, go to pinnaclelegacylaw.com. You can also find links in the show notes.